What's going on, guys? Super Savage 789 here, bringing you guys in a video. Today we're doing What If Deku Had the Omnitrix Part 1. Now, in the past, and even now, I'm really critical of these kinds of what ifs. I don't think giving Deku a new power really changes the story, especially in the hands of lesser writers. He's either too strong and thus there is no story, or he's too weak to the point where there is no point in giving them the power if it's the exact same story. However, I do think I have the capabilities of telling a story that is not only entertaining, but has actual changes. I think I've earned the benefit of the doubt at this point. So without further ado, let's just get straight into that story. In this timeline, we'll say that a what-if wormhole opened up in the Ben 10 universe, sucking the Omnitrix through it as it descends to Earth. Its direction would be recalibrated towards Japan due to the rotation of the Earth combined with the opening of the wormhole. The watch would enter orbit and begins to rocket faster and faster towards the Earth below. At the same time, a young boy would be walking home from school only to be jumped by a sludge villain. After getting saved by his idol, he'd be quick to get his heart broken when he realizes that he can't be a hero. Izuku would be left alone on the roof, still recovering from hearing his dreams crushed by All Might. As he begins to get ready to leave, his eyes would notice a shooting star passing by in the sky. Deciding to make a wish, he'd close his eyes and declare some very simple words. I wish I could be a hero. As if by magic, the so-called shooting star changes directions, heading straight for the boy. His leg would freeze up as he's left staring at the flaming orb coming at him. It'd land right in front of him, revealing itself to be something less mundane and more mechanical. Drawn in by the foreign object, Izuku would stare at it and watches as the orb opens up, allowing a green glow to illuminate out of it. Izuku would extend his arm as if hypnotized by the glow, only for a watch to leap up, attaching itself to his arm. At first, this would invoke fear into the boy as he wildly shakes his arm, attempting to remove his watch. Clearly, however, it isn't coming off. So after reaching exhaustion, Izuku would slump onto the ground, looking down at his left arm. Doing what he does best, Izuku would analyze the foreign object on his hand. It appears to be some kind of watch, but it doesn't tell the time. He'd press the button on the side and watches as the dial pops up, revealing the silhouette of a strange figure. This intrigues the green-haired boy as he stares at it, pushing it back down. His body is enveloped in a green glow, leaving him taller. He'd look at his arms and realize that he's on fire, beginning to panic out of hypochondria. Eventually, he'd realize that he isn't in pain and that this watch transformed him into some kind of creature. No, an alien. During his panic, he'd accidentally release a small ball of flames, which would make him panic. Luckily enough, there was a nearby fire extinguisher, allowing him to quickly put the fire out. It's as if his body just grew a flame-based quirk, similar to Endeavor. To test his hypothesis, he'd fire another blast, aiming it in the air, which would confirm his suspicion. This would leave Izuku in shock that his wish had seemingly been granted. Izuku would begin messing around on top of the roof, practicing his new pyrokinetic powers. His father had similar abilities to this, so it's quite nice. Plus, he might be stuck like this forever now, so he might as well get accustomed to it. That is until he'd time out, reverting him back to his human self. Knowing there is more to this watch than meets the eye, Izuku would return home as fast as possible so he can do some further research. This means that Izuku won't be present when Bakugo gets captured. The amount of damage caused by him would be catastrophic, causing some casualties in the process before a suitable hero can show up to help. Surprisingly, this would get to the blonde boy as it makes him realize how dangerous he can be. This will come into play slowly over time, as we'll see later on in this part. It also means that Mirio would be given one for all by All Might. Izuku would slowly begin to test out his new power and figure out what houses within. He'd use Dagobah Beach as a nice training ground due to the desolate nature of the area, and begins to learn what the aliens do, learning a wide array of abilities now in his disposal. He's also unlocked a few new aliens during his various experimentation sessions. To keep them all unique, he'd give them all names based off pro heroes. These names are Endembers, Houndmutt, Diamond Arms, Kingenium, Greyzu, Ryufly, Formite, Ripzillo, Uploader, Ghost King, Outer Crust, Kamui Vines, Ectocasm, Bright Eye, Fat Tongue. For sake of the what if though, every time we refer to the aliens, we will be referring to them as their canon names, but I just figured I'd mention what Izuku would call them. This is also to make sure we don't get any confusion. Something weird here is that Bakugo would lay off bullying Izuku more. His rampage was a real eye-opener, and so while he'd still be harsh with Izuku, he isn't going out of his way to torment him. He'd also lay off using his quirk around other people as much though. I'm sure he'd still use it. Naturally, the entrance exam would rock up and Izuku would head that way to participate. With seeing Bakugo, the duo would exchange words and merely enter the testing site. Izuku would still meet Uraraka and Ida like normal. While waiting for the test to begin, Izuku would begin racking his head for which alien would be best to use. Something I note is that, unlike Ben Tennyson, Izuku would use the aliens more traditionally, rather than unorthodox. For example, an Arborian Pelorota, better known as Cannonball, is meant for being more defensive, and not like a ricocheting cannonball. Here though, Izuku would use him as a defensive alien. Due to the nature of the robots, Izuku would decide to use Upgrade. The moment the test begins, he'd slam his hand down onto the watch and transforms into Upchuck. Well, it's not the end of the world, he'll make it work. As Upchuck, he'd begin to waddle around and begins eating scraps of robots, as well as a few pieces of the one-point bots. He'd not be doing as well as he hoped, however, due to his short stubby legs and basic fighting style. Plus, everyone acts too quickly and destroys any of the more important bots before he can vomit up an explosion to destroy it. Like normal, the 0-point bot would show up and Uraraka would get caught. Due to his stubby legs, he wouldn't be able to run over to help in time, but he wouldn't let that stop him. He shouts over to Ida and tells him that they have to help, which he'd reluctantly agree to. Despite his speed, he won't make it. Izuku tells him that he'll slow it down while he helps her, which Ida would agree to. As Ida rushes over, Izuku begins shooting explosions at the robot, which makes it stagger. It doesn't really do much damage, but it does slow it down long enough for Ida to get Uraraka out of there, right as the time wears off. This means that not only Izuku gets hero points, but so would Ida. Izuku would make it into UA like normal, and enter 1A pretty much all the same, except Bakugo and Ida won't be arguing when he enters. They meet Aizawa, and then everyone gets ready for the quirk apprehension test. Here, Izuku would use Accelerate, which lets him win the first test by far. The weightlifting would be a bit harder, but his tail could probably do something. By the time of the ball throw though, Izuku would have timed out, which is where we're presented with another issue. Izuku had no incentive to get physically fit here. The only reason he was on Dagobah Beach is due to its desolate nature, so the ball would barely go a few meters when he throws it. Despite scoring badly, Aizawa would see potential in him, especially for a quirkless boy, and so he doesn't expel him. Next up is the All Might training. Here though would be some changes in the strategies between Izuku and Uraraka as well as Ida and Bakugo. Since Bakugo is much less hot-headed, he'd be more willing to accept Ida's help, though his use of language would still be quite profound. Ida and Bakugo would form a plan that would be similar to Canon, with Bakugo rushing up front and Ida defending. As for Izuku and Uraraka, Izuku would be planning on using Ghost Freak, since he can phase through the walls and let Uraraka be the diversion, even though being in this form freaks him out. The moment the test begins, Izuku would dial up Ghost Freak and slams it down. He's then shocked and realizes that he is grey matter. Everyone spectating this would be dumbfounded, as Izuku realizes they need a new plan. When a Bakugo inevitably comes around the corner, Uraraka would be face to face with him and his right hook. Listening to Izuku, she'd do a move similar to what Izuku does in Canon. Here though, Grey Matter would leap onto Bakugo's person and enter his grenade gauntlet, without Bakugo even knowing. Uraraka would do her best to keep Bakugo distracted and begins fighting him off. Of course, this is Bakugo, and naturally, he's much smarter as well as stronger. Plus, not seeing Izuku anywhere, he'd assume he's fighting Ida right now, so time is of the necessity. Izuku would tamper with the grenade gauntlet before leaping out and stealing a stun grenade. He then shouts at Uraraka to run, revealing himself to Bakugo. Before he can react though, he is blinded, allowing Uraraka to rush off. When his eyes recover, he'd see Izuku running away and begins to chase him down, catching up rather quickly. He'd throw one explosion at the tiny creature, however Izuku was one step ahead. With a small amount of Bakugo's sweat stored in his mouth, he'd shoot it out and cause an explosion in Bakugo's face. Through the smoke, Izuku would time out as he leaps through and grabs the grenade gauntlet. Channeling all his strength, he'd remove it while also removing the clip, throwing it into the air. It'd cause a massive explosion, which would do some damage to Izuku and Bakugo, though nothing major. It would however cause some destruction to the terrain, which makes Ida lose his footing. Uraraka would take the opportunity to then make herself weightless to grab the rocket, giving them the win. Afterwards, Izuku would be feeling much better about himself with that win. If he can win with his weakest alien, imagine what he could do at his strongest. As he's going home though, Bakugo would catch up to him and say some very simple yet very powerful words. What's up with that watch? But that's where we're going to leave it here for right now. If you enjoyed this part, why not hit the like button? It supports your channel and lets me know you want to see a part 2. As I say, I'm not a big fan of these kinds of ideas, but getting back into Ben 10 has really inspired me to do something with it. Also, I might as well put my money where my mouth is, because every time I tell someone this, they're always like, no. But, you know, I'll just prove them wrong. I'll prove them the best, and, you know, there's that. And so, yeah. Bye.